why do we want to have a conversation about that? Like we go into what FOSS is and like all of those things later. But yeah, I do want to try and address any cognitive dissonance that might exist in terms of me being here and talking about FOSS at a conversation on the future of commons. Maybe I can argue better. No, I just feel like this and like all of those things. But yeah, I do want to try and address any cognitive dissonance that might exist in terms of me being here and talking about FOSS.
Understood why.
No, that's cognitive. But for the benefit of everybody, resource on Tamil dictionary as independent products. And there is nothing wrong with it. There is no sovereignty to the project as a user base, as a reader base, all of that is fine. But to think that we are the only ones who are contributing to the idea of the open knowledge or the idea of the free knowledge movement is not fair, at least at this point, because there have been many other initiatives that have happened. The conference that Rahul was mentioning was called the FOSS conference, which is the single largest place for people to meet who have anything to do with the idea of the free and open. Software, of course, is a focus, but there are various other strains and streams of conversation also happening. When we got to know that he's in Hyderabad and we are doing this in Hyderabad, we said, why shouldn't these two communities talk to each other? While you create a lot of knowledge, you create a lot of content, it might be helpful to see what the other half of the world, which is deep, taking a deep dive into technology, into software, into a very, very different community that is focused on product. And if there is a new collaboration that all of us can set off. I know a lot of you already work in technology. I know some of you work in outreach. I know some of you are working on projects and products that can be taken to bigger communities and bigger ideas. So this, in very, very simple words, is a bridge that we are trying to build. Rahul is going to walk a few steps on behalf of FOSS, and I'm hoping that we will walk a few steps on behalf of the community. And hopefully we will build the bridge together so that we don't, the next time we bump into each other, we don't have to say, oh, we do the same thing, why am I not talking? Next time when we bump into each other, it is like, it was lovely working with you, I think we should do something. Right? That's the idea. Points.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect.
Oh, right. All right. Great. Thanks so much, Ranveer, Rahul, Nivas, for actually already setting the context. As you can see, we've kind of come full circle. We started with conversations around the future of the commons. This thought that the commons is in a crisis. Where is the digital commons heading? Where are open source, open knowledge movements going? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Many questions. And I think we've discussed that over the last 2 days. This talk really, in a sense, we're sort of seeing how we can bring these conversations together. And I'm very happy that this is also our 11th Future of the Commons session, or Future of the Commons talk. As you're all aware, the Future of the Commons talks series is something we started last year after the conference that we had. Conference, of course, talked about AI, Indian languages, and archives. And since then, of course, we've had talks on various topics, all, of course, reflecting back on the idea of the commons and how that has been changing over the last years. So I'm very happy to introduce our speaker for today. Rahul is the CEO of the FOSS United Foundation, which works to support and promote the free and open source software ecosystem in India. He has been contributing to the FOSS ecosystem for more than 8 years, both through code contributions and by giving talks about various FOSS technologies. So I think Rahul.
Thank you, everyone, for that introduction. So we'll jump right in. How many people here don't use software? Anyone here who does not use software at all? No one, right? Yeah, that's a great baseline to start with. How many people don't use free and open source software? like again, do you not use, please, like you don't use free and open. Anyone else who does not use free and open source software? Okay, a couple of
Somebody
hands.
is using internet is using FOSS.
Yeah, that's what I want to get to.
If you are not using internet, then you are not using FOSS.
That's exactly what I want to get to. But again, like if you're not directly, explicitly aware about free and open source software that you're using, like I'd like to just like hear about that. So yeah, do you use Android? Android open source project is open source, and Google Android is based on top of the Android open source project. Yeah, so Google is a fairly common example. What browser do you use? Chrome is based on top of the Chromium browser,
Yes.
right? So, how many people here use Firefox? How many people use Chrome? Please keep your hands up. That's the entire audience, right? Like everyone uses either Firefox or Chrome or one of the other Chromium browsers. Brave is also based on top of Chromium. There's so many other like derivative browsers which are built on top of Chromium. The phones that we're running like use either use Google Android, which is based on top of the Android open source project, which is free and open source. How many people here use an iPhone? iOS is based on Mac OS, which is based on something called Linux. It's the Berkeley software distribution. BSD is what this is based on top of. Everything that we're using, whether we recognize it explicitly or not, is free and open source. Let me just take a brief step. I'm Poruri Sai Rahul. You can just call me Rahul. My native tongue is Telugu, and I'm also comfortable with English and Hindi. If you'd like to ask me questions, you can ask me in any of these languages. I'm happy to translate and respond to you. If you're not comfortable with English or any of the other languages. So the software that we are already using is free and open source. Either software that we are directly using is free and open source, or one step below or two steps below, the software that we're relying on is free and open source, right? Any other examples of free and open source software that people might already be using every day? Telegram, the clients are free and open source. VLC Media Player is free and open source. I'm guessing a lot of people use VLC Media Player. Any other examples? So
Linux.
yeah, Linux is free and open source. Audacity is free and open source. I think I just skipped the part about me, but I do want to briefly talk about one thing. So my background is in physics. I did my bachelor's and master's in physics, and then I started doing a lot of computational work, and then I ended up doing scientific software work, which is where I got into the FOSS ecosystem. And now, like, I'm actively working at the FOSS Foundation. Just a brief comment about the FOSS Foundation. So we promote and support the free and open source software ecosystem in India. We do that in three ways. We organize events across the country of various different sizes. We give grants to people who are actively working on free and open source software project, if not creating new free and open source software from India. And we try and push the government to either create new policy or enforce existing policy, which is pro free and open source software. This is a little bit of a recent obsession of mine, something called Typist. It is like LaTeX. How many people here have heard about LaTeX? Yeah, so Typist is like LaTeX. You can use it to create slides. The slides are not based on PowerPoint. So roughly three kinds of software that we're looking at. There's traditional computers that people are running, mobile devices that people have, and software that is sort of running behind the scenes, right? Someone said Linux, and other Linux operating systems are things that we can run on our desktops. Traditional computers, we have Android and iOS, which are both derivatives, if not direct descendants of free and open source software. And then there's a bunch of stuff which is behind the scenes. Any other examples of free and open source software that people are already aware of? That you use in your day-to-day life? Yes.
Wikipedia is based out of MediaWiki.
Yeah. Wikipedia itself is based on top of MediaWiki, which is free and open source. LibreOffice is free and open source. Yeah, it's an alternative to the Microsoft suite. Blender is free and open source, can be used to create animations. 7-zip? 7-zip is free and open source? I didn't realize it. 7-zip is definitely free. I haven't checked if it is free and open source. I never confirmed. I'll have to go back and check. GIMP. If you want to do graphics work on your computer. Inkscape, if you want to be able to like draw vector graphics, you can use Inkscape for that.
Hydrogen,
Sorry,
hydrogen,
hydrogen. I'm not sure what hydrogen is.
natron,
Sorry,
natron.
no, I'm not sure. I'm not aware. Um, on your mobile devices, like are people aware of? So the mobile operating system itself might be this. There are browsers. What other free and open source might you be using on your phones?
On desktop for computation, use the GNU Octave.
Yeah, GNU Octave is FOSS, do computation. Jupyter Notebooks is free and open source. QGIS is free and open source for GIS work. Um, um, so at the end of the day, there's a ton of open source on your computers in front of you, on the phones that you're most likely using, and even things that are behind the scenes. So I'm not sure how many people are aware of the F-Droid app store on your phone. You don't only have to rely on Google Play Store to be able to install your apps. You can use something called the F-Droid app store where you can download free and open source apps on your mobiles, right? How many people here use a VPN? So, sorry? Yeah, so OpenVPN, if I'm not wrong, is free and open source, but there's also something called Rethink DNS, which is a DNS and a VPN solution, which is also free and open source. And that's something that you can use on your mobile devices. Most likely everyone uses Google Photos. What other alternative do you use to apart from Google Photos?
Sulfur,
Sorry?
sulfur.
Pixel. Yeah, I think this is another alternative. One other alternative that I've heard of is called Image. Something that is much more recent, which came out of Kerala is Ente. Ente Photos. Ente is mine in Malayalam. I just got to know recently. Signal and Telegram, the clients are open source. We're using Zoom right now, but there's something called Jitsi, which is what we use for all of our video conferencing solutions. We can do the same sort of live streaming onto YouTube from Jitsi as well.
Blue button.
Sorry?
Big blue
Big Blue Button is another alternative to Jitsi. Big Blue Button, if I'm not wrong, is much more academic focused in terms of like classrooms and classroom sort of settings. And just as important is also software that is running behind the scenes. Like the gentleman was saying, if you're using the internet, you're relying on free and open source software, right? So there are these things called there's this thing called curl, CURL, which runs on practically every car manufactured by most major car manufacturers. But it's all happening behind the scenes, which is why no one knows about it and people don't acknowledge it, and the person who's maintaining doesn't get paid by any of those people. How many of you have tried like a generative AI chat thingy, maybe OpenAI something, Anthropic something? How many of you have tried it? Everyone has tried it. The entirety of the generative AI ecosystem and the AI ecosystem is built on top of the work in NumPy, SciPy, TensorFlow, Scikit-learn. All of these packages from the scientific Python community and others are what are the giants that the generative AI ecosystem is built on top of, right? I don't know how many of you have heard about NumPy and SciPy before now. A couple of people have heard about it before. But again, those are free and open source, and people have been building those packages, if I'm not wrong, for close to 2 decades. There's even more something called ML Flow, which is like machine learning specific to be able to understand how the models are performing, etc., etc. Institutions like this most likely have some sort of an enterprise resource planning software, or most organizations end up having some sort of an enterprise resource planning software. ERP Next, one of our funders, disclosure, is a free and open source software ERP solution. Again, because institutions to be able to handle finances, handle accounting, etc., etc. ERP Next can handle it. I think a couple of other things there are Moodle, which is a learning management system that is free and open source. I think the last one is Scrite. I don't know how many people here maybe dabble in screenwriting or screenplays. No one? Okay. Scrite is a free and open source software that can be used to write screenplays. It came out of Bangalore and it has actually been used to create a couple of recent blockbusters in Kannada. The reason why I'm saying all these things again is there is an incredible wealth of free and open source software that we are either using directly ourselves or you dig one level deeper, two level deeper, you will run into free and open source software, right? That is just the reality of where we are right now. It is not a question whether you use free and open source software. It is just a matter of how deep is the free and open source software buried under the software that you're using. Right? Even if you're using like a proprietary solution, like you're paying for Windows or you're paying for Microsoft Office or any one of these things, you dig deep enough and you will find open source packages which are being used, open source projects that are being relied upon, etc., etc. I don't remember how to navigate it on an Android phone, but on an iPhone, if you go into about licenses, you'll actually see all the different free and open source software that are being used in iOS itself. So if someone ever asks you, are you using free and open source? It should be abundantly clear to you that yes, you are. And hopefully, you also have enough backing evidence now to be able to tell them that not only are you using it, anyone else that you talk to is also using free and open source software. The same way digital knowledge commons is prevalent around us, free and open source software is also prevalent around us. It's basically the air that we breathe without recognizing the fact that we're breathing it. And we don't acknowledge it and we don't pay attention to it until it gets polluted. It withers away, and then we are sort of like stuck dealing with software that doesn't work. But what is this free and open source software, right? The term free usually sort of leads people in the wrong direction. So I've given you a few examples, right? Let me take a step back. I've given you a few examples. So what other software do you think maybe that you're using is free and open source? Like any other software that you might be aware of, maybe that you're using on your desktops or your like phones that you think is free and open source based on sort of this categorization.
And some of the library management systems and digital document systems like DSpace, Greenstone, and these are all free software.
Are they free software or are they free and open source software? Someone else will have to clarify that for me. Okay, they're free and open source software. Okay.
And Koha also is based on these.
Okay, so okay, that's because so I'm trying to hopefully find examples where sorry? GAMP. GAMP. GIMP. Yeah. So GIMP is free and open source. So what I'm trying to get at is because of the term free, right? There is a confusion that some software that they're able to use for free is free and open source. I want to see if there's that confusion like with anyone here. Which is? WinZip. Yes. WinZip is free to download, free to use, but it is not free and open source because
we have not released the codes.
Because they have not released the source code, right? Any other example of something that you use for free that
Adobe Reader.
Sorry?
Adobe Reader.
Adobe Reader, right? I don't know how many people here use Adobe Reader. Right? It's fairly common. It's something that you can download for free. It is not free and open source. Any other examples? Yes.
Mistral AI, somebody has used Mistral AI.
Most AI bots, right? Like you can use OpenAI for free, you can ask Anthropic for free. Most AI bots, you can ask them for free. They are not free and open source. I heard one other response from you. Sublime is free to use. PyCharm is free to use. But those things are not free and open source software because the source code is not available. Google Maps is free to use. Gmail is free to use. But these are not free and open source software, right? This is also a very, very prevalent thing that you will run into people, and when you talk to them, this is what their understanding of FOSS is going to be. So at least for all of you, I want to ensure that you know exactly what we mean by free and open source software. And the reason why is people are trying to subtly change the definitions of everything around us. Once terms are popular, once terms are part of the natural cultural zeitgeist, once terms have become monetizable or like they are the thing to be able to market whatever it is that they're building, people have begun hijacking the words to be able to mean whatever it is that they want. But we, at the very least, should know exactly what these things mean so that we're able to correct other people. I can't go around saying that some data which I find on a website is open data. All of you will kick me out if I do that. right? So there's a very specific meaning for what free and open source is. And there are 4 freedoms that are usually associated with what it means to be free software. Point number 0 is free does not mean uchitam. Uchitam is Telugu for like free. Free does not mean muft in Hindi. Free means freedom, right? It's about the freedom that you have or the freedoms that you have. So that's swatantrata, that's svecha. Those are what we mean by free. So, for example, the Malayalam free software, not free software community, but Swatantra Malayalam Computing is a very popular community in Kerala, which has been building out free software tools for a very long time. Right? Svecha is a similar community in Andhra, which has a lot of like association with IIT Hyderabad as well, and they are also promoting the free software community in Telangana and Andhra. So when we say free, we are not talking about free money. If you search online, you'll hear the phrase free as in freedom, not free as in beer. I don't know why they use that phrase. I can't relate to it. I don't know where beer is free, but yes. So that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about what freedoms is this software providing us. And there's 4 freedoms that people talk about. Freedom number 1 is the fact that you can run the program however you want. Right? So, for example, with WinZip, you can run the program however you want on your own machine. So, technically, this freedom is covered for WinZip. But then, when you look at some of the other freedoms, that is where we realize, okay, WinZip is not free. On the other hand, we might be using Zoom for free right now, but you cannot run the program Zoom however you want. Right? We, for example, are not able to run Zoom on our computers without having to worry about Zoom, the company, knowing about the software. Right? Or we are not able to use the program, run the program, however we fit for any purpose. One other example usually is there are certain software, for example, Figma, you can't get an educational license for Figma and then use it for commercial purposes. I'm guessing there's other software also in this category, right? Like there's certain license under which you get the software. You cannot use the software for another purpose. Let's say get it education and then use it for commercial stuff. That violates freedom number 1. You can't run those programs however you want because there are specific license terms under which that software is given to us.
So what about Microsoft Teams? Something we used during the COVID times from.
Perfect. So Microsoft Teams again, it is free to use, but it is not free and open source because we are not able to. I'm trying to think if there's a way in which
Change the source code according to us.
yes.
What
So
we do at JC.
yeah. So that's even further. But even just the simple question of can I run Microsoft Teams however I want? I'm not entirely sure. So for example, can I run Microsoft Teams without giving any telemetry to Microsoft?
You can run a team in a portable pen drive, you can't run that.
Yeah. So for example, I can't, let's say, run Teams from without having to install it on my machine and giving it a whole bunch of access. I can't simply say, okay, I'm going to have Teams on a simple pen drive and then like try and boot the Teams app from that device. That's what you're saying, right? Yeah.
I think it has to be downloaded by Institute or something like that. As far as I remember.
Yeah. So again, it's not free and I think this is freedom 2 is a better answer for Microsoft Teams. So freedom number 2 is study how the program works. And if you have to be able to study how it works, you have to have access to the source code. And we can't access the source code of Microsoft Teams because they have not given it to us, because it is like closed source and proprietary, right? I'm sorry, I completely I used WinZip for the wrong answer. But yeah, there's a bunch of software, including, for example, Adobe Reader. We can use Adobe Reader to open whatever files we want on whatever machines that we have, but we don't have access for the software. We don't have access to the source code of the software, which is why we are not able to understand why the software is working the way it is, right? And we freedom number 2 also says that we can change it so that it does what we want it to. And this again, like if you have access to the source code, you can change it to behave the way that you want it. Let's say there is some free and open source software that you all have, which is being MediaWiki, for example. MediaWiki is free and open source. There's a certain new feature that you want to add in Wikipedia that does not exist right now. You can actually go and make that change in MediaWiki by yourself, or you can work with someone who has programming skills to be able to implement that change. And that is only possible because the MediaWiki software is free and open source. Right? With Adobe, for example, we are not able to go and modify the Adobe Reader software by ourselves because we don't have access to the source code. Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Office, Windows, all of these things are not free and open source because we don't have access to the source code and we are not able to modify how these things behave. How many people here maybe use Notion or Obsidian or one of these apps? Notion, bunch of people. Notion has extensions, right? Notion has plugins. Yeah. So I think some people, especially for applications which can have like a plugin system, right? Like Notion, like Obsidian, they might also get confused that, oh, hey, I'm able to modify the system because I'm able to add a plugin and then make it behave how I want. But that is still not free and open source because yes, you're able to add some functionality that you want, but you're not able to modify existing functionality in those softwares. Right?
It's like a Docker and API.
Yes, yeah. So you're able to talk to its internals and then do something with it, but you're not able to modify some of the existing underlying functionalities. You can install apps on your Windows computer and use those apps, but you cannot modify Windows itself. So Windows is not free and open source. Notion and Obsidian are not free and open source. Freedom number 3 is redistribute copies of the software so you can help other people. How many people have like given like a Microsoft Windows ISO to someone else that you know? Mostly everyone, right? Right? I don't think that is technically like legal, right? Because we are not supposed to distribute copies of Windows. If they want a Windows copy, they should go to Microsoft, ask them for a Windows copy, and then download it. I'm not even talking about the licenses. I'm not talking about cracked version. Just the simple fact that there is a Windows ISO. That ISO is how you install Windows. And we are not supposed to redistribute those copies. Windows and Microsoft exclusively have the permission to redistribute these things. Oh no. So, so
Windows destroyed.
so why doesn't Microsoft come and prosecute all of us?
They want to stay in the market.
Now, can you repeat the question?
Yes, so we are not supposed to distribute Windows ISO files so that other people can install Windows. But why isn't Microsoft coming and suing all of us?
It is a marketing strategy.
It's a marketing strategy. It's a way in which, so the cost of, this is cost of doing business, right? They are not going and pursuing litigation against all of you because you are basically helping them increase Windows adoption. Right?
They are mostly using the commercial license.
But
Eventually people might get commercial license.
no, but they sue if you are using it in commercially.
Yes, so but there again, at some point, if you're using it within a company, they'll come and do an audit, and if you're using unlicensed stuff, then they'll put a fine on you.
Data collection.
Data collection is like much smaller. I don't think they're getting much out of data collection. The larger thing is like they themselves are not going and convincing people to use Windows. All of us are doing our job for them, right? We are going and selling Windows on behalf of Microsoft at this point effectively. Sorry, I had one other response as to why they're not coming and suing us.
The government wants to get it interrupted.
Yeah, right? Yes. So on our individual computers, Microsoft like isn't going to care. But then because we are so used and ingrained to Windows, eventually when we go to a company and we start working there, if they don't have Windows, we'll tell them, no, you have to buy Windows. And if they don't buy Windows, they become liable financially, and possibly companies don't want to do it because they'll get fined tons of money. Right? This is not just a question of Microsoft Windows, but this is a question of defaults. When you're using a piece of software, please ask yourself why you're using that piece of software. If that is the default that you've been taught, Why is that the default that you have been taught? Because Windows is the default for most people. When most people think about presentations, they think about Microsoft Office Suite, or documents, they think about Microsoft Word. When people think about like browsers, at this point, they think about Chrome. Chrome itself is not free and open source. Chromium is free and open source. But again, in general, it's a fundamental question of what are the defaults that you're all using. And with a lot of closed source software, with a lot of closed source proprietary software, I don't think we have the freedom to be able to redistribute copies of that software. But usually, those companies will not come and try and sue us into oblivion. They're letting us be because we are doing marketing work for those people. And this has become so ingrained in people that we can't talk to a school kid about switching to a free and open source software because they have been using Windows from day zero. They've been exposed to it from day zero. And the longer people spend time with certain defaults, the harder it becomes for people to move away from those defaults. Right? There are a lot of people, for example, who are diehard Apple fans because they've been in the Apple ecosystem since day one and they're never going to get out. Same thing with Android. This is a bit of a tangent, but it is also just as important to understand. And it's important to understand the broader philosophy of why free and open source software is ecosystem, especially in the larger commons perspective, right?
Yeah, but then Microsoft, I mean, supposedly they do that, but even they giving Docker for a Linux, I mean, Ubuntu for a Windows.
Yes.
They never let us to move somewhere.
Yeah. The overall Microsoft journey has been very interesting to see because Steve Ballmer, who was the CEO a while back, called Linux a virus because of how the licenses behave and how anything that uses the Linux operating system, or let's say the GPL and AGPL licenses, becomes infected by those license conditions. To very recently, Microsoft saying that Microsoft loves Linux at one of the recent conferences that we attended. It's very interesting because Microsoft open source the .NET libraries, which are used for most of the things that are built in the Windows ecosystem, etc., etc. But anyway, fundamental question: are you able to redistribute a specific software by yourself? And again, just because you are giving it to people does not mean that we have the freedom to do this work. Again, just a bit of a tangent. How many of you have read like some products, terms and conditions completely? Anyone? Okay, a few people have actually read all of the terms and conditions. This exactly is where we are caught, right? We don't read these things fully, so we don't understand what we're getting ourselves into. And in those buried in those terms and conditions is usually where they will say things like, no, you can't redistribute copies of this yourself. They have to come to us and get it from us. And the last, but one of the most important freedoms with free and open source software, with free software, is look, I not only can modify the software so that it's doing what I want it to use. If a feature does not exist, if some functionality does not exist, I'm able to add it to the software, and I'm also able to distribute that to other people, right? So all of us can, let's say, add some sort of a functionality to some open source software that we're using. Let's say again, MediaWiki, maybe you used it personally, you modified MediaWiki to be able to get some functionality yourself. But because MediaWiki is free and open source, you're also able to distribute the changes that you made and you can give it to other people. You can even give it back to MediaWiki and they will incorporate it if it is a broadly usable feature. This is one of the fundamental aspects of, again, free and open source software. We can modify it, and not only can we modify it, we are able to re-release it back into the public so that other people can also use it. This especially is why we are talking about commons over here. Because not only are we purely thinking about the freedom that we get as an individual, but also about how we are able to use that freedom and enable other people's freedoms, right? By adding things. Yes, sir.
So that's also the do commercially also.
Yes, perfect. That's what I was going to get to. No restriction whatsoever. You can use these things for whatever it is that you want. There are licensing restrictions, which we will get to. Not licensing restrictions. There are restrictions with how you can license the changes, right? How you can release the changes. So once again, 4 freedoms, free software, free and open source software is not a question of Uchitam, it's not a question of Muft, it's not a question of free. Free as in free money. It's a question of the freedoms that we get. We should have the freedom to be able to run the software however we want. We should be able to understand why the software is doing what it is doing. And to be able to do that, we have to have access to the source code. We have to be we should be able to redistribute copies of that software to other people. And then finally, we have to be able to make changes, and whatever changes we have made, we should be able to give it to other people. Yes, sir.
Wikipedia, we also say Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia in the same sense.
Okay, so it's about freedom.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So this again, the reason why I'm emphasizing on freedom so much is because I do feel like one of the things that most, if not all of the digital commons share is this aspect of freedom, both in terms of us having the freedom to be able to create something and put it out into the commons, and also having the freedom to be able to enable other people to also gain that freedom because of the things that we put out, right? Now, what the gentleman mentioned, there's this, like when I say free and open source, a question also usually arises, what is this free and what is this open source, and why are these two things being clubbed together? This is because there was an ideological shift in the ecosystem a long time ago. Free software means that not only can you make changes to things, but if you make some changes to free software, you also have to release that under the exact same license terms. Right? So, for example, with Linux operating system, if Microsoft, for whatever reason, comes and makes modifications to Linux, they have to release those modifications under the exact same license. Whereas at some point, there were people who split off from the free software community and who created open source software. And with open source software, they said, it's okay, you modify it and do whatever you want with it. You don't have to release it back into the public. You don't even have to release it under the same license. And this is where a lot of the sort of corporate usage of open source software exploded. Because they said, oh, you know what, now we can start using it to start making money, and whatever changes we make to the software to fit our use cases, we don't have to release it back to other people. So this is where exploitation of the free and open source software community started beginning, because open source software gave the freedom to the users to modify it and then not release things back out. So it's sort of like you put together an open data corpus, you put it out for other people to use. And if they're making modifications to it, they're not giving it back to you. They are not putting it back into the public again. You built out a dictionary. Someone is taking that dictionary, adding new vocabulary into the dictionary, new words and new definitions, and then they are not releasing those new things back in the public again. That is what effectively the open source software ecosystem became, splitting off from this free software ecosystem. And again, like this naturally ended up becoming a cycle of exploitation because again, companies started using and building on top of open source software because all of a sudden you don't have to write all of this code by yourself and you're able to rely on code that exists in the commons, in the digital commons, in the free and open source software ecosystem. And you are able to build the 10, 20, 30% of glue code on top to be able to bring all of these open source softwares together and then get it to do what you want, right? I do feel some amount of similarities with some Creative Commons licenses. I'm not entirely comfortable with Creative Commons licenses. Can someone please maybe map these onto like Creative Commons licenses? Share alike, yeah. So share alike means that if you make changes, it has to be shared under the same license, and then sorry, CC0. CC0 is you make whatever changes, you don't have to like share alike, right? Yeah. So I don't know what the dynamics are in the open data community because of CC0 and CC share alike, but do imagine the same sort of equivalence and the sort of dynamics that they create, especially with enterprises and for-profit entities, because of the licensing restrictions of free software versus open source software. But again, sorry.
What
created the split? Was there like it was like gradual or like some moment?
No, it was gradual. I think over the course of a couple of years. There's this very famous book called The Cathedral and the Bazaar, which is a very standard reference. Eric Raymond? Eric S. Raymond. Eric S. Raymond is the person who wrote the book. And I think Eric S. Raymond is one of the people behind the ideological shift, split from the free software community into an open source software community. And it was definitely about, hey, look, I don't want to force this on whoever is making the changes. If they want to go ahead and use it, they can go ahead and use it. And there still is to this day level of aversion to free software that exists in certain enterprises just because of the GPL, AGPL, the share alike nature of the changes that need to happen in there. Completely irrational to us to some extent, because in a lot of cases they don't even have to make any changes to the software to be able to use it, but they're still like, no, I don't know what sort of like magic is going to happen, so I'm going to stay away from it.
But it has also benefited, right, in some ways. So like some of the engineers contribute.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So again, like the success of the open source software ecosystem is because of that compromise, where they said it's okay, we will create it and put it out, and if people want to consume it and don't give it back, don't put it back in the digital commons, then that's okay. But that also is a significant reason as to why we have the sustainability crisis in the free and open source software ecosystem. Again, I don't fully understand the sustainability of the like wiki community or the online open data communities, but I'm guessing there is some amount of parallels here with the free and open source software communities as well, because you're putting it out there and people are able to use it, and not only do people use it. Again, this is going a little bit deeper, but I don't know, for example, let's say you put out something in CC0. I don't know if they keep coming back to you with some expectation of, hey, look, you made this CC0, you also now owe additional updates to this software based on whatever we are asking of you, or whatever changes to that corpus we demand of you, we are going to come and ask you, and you have to make those changes. Because that is what happens in the open source ecosystem. Some corporate is going to start using the open source software. They will realize that there's some functionality missing, there are some bugs that exist in the software. They will not fix it in the spirit of the commons. They will just come and shout at maintainers and say, you made a software which has bugs, you owe me fixes. Any other comments or thoughts on that? Because again, like I'm coming from the free and open source software ecosystem, so I'm trying to see if you all are able to draw parallels with the kind of licensing and sustainability problems that you see in the various parts of the digital commons that you are all from.
But also they done like that. Some person they ensure that they're not supposed to be like, again, they give the community some this back community. Sometimes they don't take ownership on much of their opinion.
Yeah. Again, like there's a lot of
Actually, you want to.
there's more than enough. Any other like communities? Yeah, okay. So the other thing though that I do also want to clarify is with free and
There is one question on.
oh cool.
You can view.
If you can see the question, I think you can say it out loud. That will probably be easier.
View, yeah. So just unmute.
Yeah, typing a question might be easier.
Chat. There. They haven't unmuted. Oh, okay. Click on the three dots.
Anyone else? So again, for example, like are there similar sort of issues with CC0 versus CC share alike?
Actually, CC0 is like, I release, like, let's say I am releasing something in the CC0, please. Anyone can use that content without even mentioning about my contribution.
Yes. So
Same thing happens, like, let's say, if I modify some images under 60 by SA 4.0, that means I need to maintain that license.
yes. Yeah.
Happens in commerce.
Yeah.
You cannot change the license.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, because the additional question also is, if you release something under CC0, will someone use it, come back to you and demand that you maybe make some more changes in the original content?
Never happens.
That is prevalent in the open source software ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think the assumption of the gift economy, which is rampant from the 90s, is something like it's maintenance challenging. Yeah, no, I think there was a talk by someone who did talk about open source software from the point of view of it being a gift economy. But then another person who's also in the FOSS ecosystem told me that gifts in India don't exactly map to gifts in the US. Because he was talking about how he is part of a couple of communities where gifts are obsessively tracked by families to ensure that they're repaying those gifts when functions happen in the other people's families, which doesn't exactly map onto the US perceptions, cultural understanding of what a gift is. So yeah. Yeah, but one very important aspect of free and open source software is the fact that there's no restriction being placed on who can use it and for what. So, for example, with CC and C, if I'm not wrong, it can't be used for commercial purposes because you're explicitly releasing it under non-commercial clause. With free and open source software, there is no such restriction whatsoever. You can use it for commercial purposes, you can use it for personal uses, whatever is the case, right? The only restriction is on if you want to make a change to it, it has to come out under the same license for free software. For open source software, you can make a change and you don't have to put it back out under the same license, right? So there is no restriction placed on usage. It can be used for commercial purposes. This again, one of the reasons why Linux is as popular as it is because people are able to use it to run servers. Most of the internet, again, like the gentleman was saying in the very beginning, right? If you're accessing a website, 97% of the time that website is being served by a Linux server somewhere in the cloud. When people call the cloud, when people refer to the cloud, they're usually talking about some server sitting in some data center, which is most likely running a Linux operating system, right? Whether that's an Ubuntu or a Red Hat or a Fedora or a Unix or whatever. There's so many different flavors of the Linux operating systems. But at the end of the day, if you're using the internet, you're most likely talking to a Linux server on the other side, which is giving you content on the website. So there's no restriction on personal use versus commercial use for free and open source software. And the software is also provided without warranty. I don't know what the parallels are with the digital knowledge, rest of the digital knowledge ecosystem, digital commons ecosystems, but with software especially, right? Once people start relying on it for commercial purposes, if something breaks, people will not only come back and shout at you, people will also most likely come back and sue you for creating software which has bugs in it, because of which they experience some sort of financial harm, right? There are so many software outages that happen. I don't know if people here have experienced some sort of a software issue, software glitch, software failure. Like any examples of maybe at least one software issue that you faced?
Data breaches.
Data breaches? Yeah, sure.
Blue screen of
Blue screen of death that happened with Windows recently, where it just sort of froze for multiple days, etc., etc. So, something caused that to happen. If there was some open source software that was used and some bug in that open source software which eventually caused these sort of issues, the open source software very clearly says, look, I am releasing this under no warranty. You cannot come and blame me if there is some sort of a financial effect that this causes on you. Because again, I'm putting this out into the commons. It is the user's responsibility to ensure that they're using it safely, that they are not going to get financial harm in case there are some bugs in this software. This again is extremely prevalent because one, it is open source software, so people will inevitably come and ask them for things and ask them for features and so on. And then on top of it, if they're using free and open source software and they experience some sort of a failure, some server went down, etc., etc., there's an even larger amount of just trash that the open source software maintainers have to experience. Because again, this company is going to come and say, you created software that has bugs in it. It was not their responsibility to ensure that they were using the software in a meaningful way, in a way that wouldn't take down their entire system. It's people basically shifting the blame from here to there. Yeah, I'm not sure like what the equivalents are or the parallels are with the digital commons ecosystems. Like, does someone get sued if there is, let's say, some missing information from a wiki page?
Yeah, there are so many cases, especially for editing on Wikipedia.
Yeah,
There are so many cases.
yeah. So again, like I'm not talking about, let's say, unfactual information or anything, but I'm rather talking about like missing information. Because that is the only parallel that I can draw with free and open source software, where there is something missing in the software which is causing it to not work as expected. And then that is what the creators are very clearly saying. Just because something is missing, I am not responsible, I am not liable for any problems that you experience with it. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
No. Not happen in
Okay.
Wikipedia.
Okay.
Yeah. Millions of stuff article as well.
Yeah.
Not.
Like one other thing sorry, you were able to say something. Okay. One other thing, for example, is if you intentionally put out like an open data set which is biased, are you liable? Right? Because let's say you intentionally put out an open data set which is biased towards a certain gender or a certain ethnography, a certain race, or whatever it is the case, while calling yourself as a like unbiased data set, does that put some sort of like does that put the people who created the data set under some sort of a legal question mark? It does. Like, has there been some precedence for this, like in terms of actual law or like some cases which have happened?
So I don't think it happened. Or it should go on social media, I think, all these
Sure.
things, like people have done research on them.
Sure,
They release that on at blog. So
Sure.
that really.
sure. Yeah, but there's like always some social media outrage happening on there. But I've been mentioning freedom a lot, right? Like I keep talking about free as in freedom, free as in like freedom, free as in swatantrata, free as in switcha, etc., etc. But I do want to clarify one very important thing. The free software movement and the open source software movement came out of the US. 70s, 80s is when all of these things started coming out. So the original definitions of this freedom, people usually interpret those as individual freedoms, right? Like this idea of freedom in the US in terms of I have unalienable freedoms that nobody can snatch from me. I have the freedom to do X, Y, and Z. Me as an individual have freedoms which nobody else can take away, or like nobody can infringe on my individual freedoms. That is like a very prevalent and a common understanding of the free software movement for a lot of people. Um, this is what the like first this quote is. But these two things are like very interesting because like this person, anthropologist Jasmine Foles, she talked about how sort of like when we try and understand individualism versus collectivism amongst Indian and like Irish tech workers, they talk about how Indians in their sample were generally more collectivist with regard to like individual work goals, and more importantly, the freedom that people imagine and people perceive, right, when it comes to free and open source software. The Indian FOSS community, in this person's work, anthropologist, in her work, she talks about how this is about the wider socio-economic potential that free and open source software has, right? Especially for a developing nation like ours, and the moral responsibility, the moral obligation that people from the free and open source software ecosystem feel to ensure that we're able to contribute to it as individuals. So when we talk about freedom, in the Indian context, in my personal context, I'm not talking about the freedom that I should enjoy or that I have, like not some sort of a God-given right in terms of the freedoms that I have, but rather the freedom that we have as a collective, the freedom that we have as a group of people, and the freedom and to a certain extent moral obligation that we have because of the freedom that this software is able to impart on other people. right? The socioeconomic impact that this work has on a developing nation and other people in the nation. This again, there's a lot of ideology and philosophy that gets imparted and imbibed into the conversations in the free and open source software ecosystem. But personally, this is very important because this is again like where I come from. It's about a question of how is this helping us as collectives and how is this helping us reshape the socioeconomic stature in our country. I'm gonna take a brief pause there in case there's any questions or thoughts about free and open source software. Parallels, specific comments, anything.
I don't know, like for the translation, because I speak Hindi and I contribute in Hindi as well. Especially when you translate it from English to Hindi, word free, it always comes like free. Then we realize, like then we okay, so the correct Hindi translation for free in this case is mukt.
Yes.
That is open, mukt.
Perfect.
And that other word is nishulk, that is free. So whenever we use like this word free, we need to use in this context, we use mukt.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. The reason why I'm emphasizing word usage is because 2 weeks back, there was a small piece that got published in Dainik Bhaskar, and it took me way too long to read the Hindi because I haven't practiced reading Hindi in like more than a decade. But the article used the term muft.
Muft is again
Yes,
free.
Free, right?
Yeah.
So that exactly is why I'm harping on words, because like when the software is being described as muft, everyone is going to perceive it in an entirely different way. Whereas other languages have picked up words, including like there's a FOSS club called Mukti, with again the specific intention that no, we're not talking about free as in money, we're talking about free as in the freedom. So no, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Same happens with the movement word, Movement
Yeah.
again, the Andolan is
Yeah.
something different, like some freedom fighting.
Yeah.
That is a couple of challenging words which really very hard
Yeah.
to translate.
In fact, again, if there are folks from other language communities here, we'd love to know what the right translation is for this in your language. In Malayalam, the word Swatantra is what is used commonly. Again, in my understanding, Telugu Swecha is what is standard. So, other language communities, if you tell us what the right words to use are, we will try spread those words around to ensure that at least us in our cultural identities, we do not make that mistake.
In Marathi, we use mukta.
Mukta.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, in Hindi, Marathi, we can like go with
both
Mukta.
are the
Perfect.
same.
Thank you.
Punjabi Azad.
Azad. But Azad is, I'm not sure if it's like, I don't know. I don't know if like Azad is the right word here or if we need to find like some other word.
Urdu is also Azad. They use Azad.
I want to jump into the laws that we have here and I want to close it out sooner rather than later by talking about the specific cases so that like all of you can also try and relate the work that you're doing and how you can try and sustain it. So the Indian government already passed laws way back in 2014 to say that, hey, look, we want to ensure that free and open source software can be adopted in India. And not only can it be adopted, but rather they also want to incentivize creating free and open source software, right? So way back in 2010, the government said there will be open standards that are going to be used for e-governance. Technically, no government agency is supposed to give you a doc file. No government agency is supposed to give you a PPT file. Those are not open standards. Microsoft owns those standards. Those are closed standards. The government of India, way back in 2020, recognized this and said that no, we are going to have an open standard called OOXML. That is the open standard that the government uses. And if any government department comes to you with doc or PPT files, you should be able to go back and hit them with this policy and tell them that no, you have to give it to me in an open standard file. Right? Not only this, but there are a lot of other open standards that the government of India has adopted to be able to ensure that no, this is how we ensure that e-governance is happening in a meaningful way without any sort of vendor lock-in. 2014, we put together a policy on the adoption of open source software for the government of India, where the government said that wherever it is possible, if there's an equivalent open source software, the government should go for the open source software. But like with most things in India, we have good policy, bad implementation. But that is inherently bad policy. 2014, we also said the government should have open APIs so that we can talk to the APIs and either build on top of it, and we can like digest the information that exists in these e-government systems. And 2015, we put together this mouthful of a policy, collaborative application development by opening the source code of government applications. Basically, it means that the government is one of the largest spenders on software in any country, whether it's the union government, the state governments, or the local bodies. All put together, they are among, if not the largest spenders on software. And if they are spending software to get custom software created, they can actually put a clause in the contract to say that the government owns copyright and the government owns that software which was written for the government, right? Like they gave a contract, the government got, I think all of us here are working professionals, so they got money from us as tax, and that tax eventually went into the software that they paid for. So public money, public good, right? We paid for that software should be in the public domain, and the government has a policy saying that yes, we will release it, we can release it, and we can share the open source, we can share the source code for these projects and make them available in a permissive way. But here again, it's not enforced, we are not able to push them meaningfully, we are not able to hold them accountable when they are not adhering to the policy that they have on paper. I'm not sure what open data policies we have. I think we do have one open data sharing policy at the union government level. I don't know if states have also adopted that policy more or less widely. I know the Telangana government has an open data policy. But yeah, the question also then becomes how well are these governments adhering to the policy that they have on paper, and what are we able to do to be able to push them? And one simple thing that we as FOSS are trying to do is we're trying to bring more awareness about the policies. Basically, by doing things like this, talking about the fact that look, policies exist. Let's just go and read these policy documents. Right? Some of these are like 8 pages long, 10 pages long, 12 pages long. Not exactly something that is incomprehensible to us. Right? So we need a lot more people who are at least aware of the fact that there are policies that govern this. We need, as a community, to get more comfortable reading these policies, going around sharing the policies that exist already, and then if there's enough awareness, we can start thinking about, hey, how can we actually get these policies enforced? Right? Maybe at the state level, maybe at the local level, maybe at the union level. But we can only get to the enforcement stage after, again, there's enough of a mass of people within the community who are aware of the policies and actually are willing to go and enforce some of these policies. How many people here have read like an open data policy? 2 people, few people. This is the state open data policy. This is the union.
I have utilized in making a cattle company.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the policy itself, the government's, Indian government's policy, or maybe state government's policy on open data.
Government of India.
Government of India?
Government of Kerala, we had a open data policy framework. Yeah. So we had.
Yeah.
But the policy is in draft right now. It is not interested.
Okay. I think the Telangana open data policy is implemented, but I have not read the policy document. I don't know how many people are from Telangana here, and if they've read the policy or not. I don't think, funnily enough, Andhra hasn't adopted an open data policy. Yeah, they could have just copy pasted it and then said, okay, fine, we go with it. No, but that's effectively what happens in most cases. Good enough policy, we'll just happily copy paste it over here. That's what happened with the gig worker policy across states. People just said, okay, this is a good enough thing, we'll copy paste it into other states and we'll implement it over there as well. But again, the fundamental question is, have you read the policies? And if you haven't read the policies, why haven't you? Or what other policies does the government already have which influences and impacts all of the commons, all of the parts of the commons that you belong to? And if there is no policy already, why doesn't it exist? What can we do to actually get them to create one? Or what policies are they creating which directly or indirectly impacts all of our communities? Like recently, for example, the government put out again a mouthful, deep tech, there was a policy that was supposed to support the deep tech ecosystem in the country. In this very large 50 plus policy page document, they somehow squeezed in like a little bit of a slightly negative thing about free and open source software. And then they said, oh, because of some difficulties, we want to modify the patenting regime so that software patents are possible in India. And we were just like, we have no idea how you went from A to Z. How did you make this leap from A to Z? We have no idea what you mean. We don't know who you talk to. And this is what our objection is to this draft policy. Funnily enough, that draft policy hasn't resurfaced after the initial phase of comments. So the few consultations that the government of India does right now on policies that they're putting together, it is important for us to be able to give feedback on these policies. Otherwise, it'll just sort of go through. And again, we as a community, as a collective, as the commons need to sort of build up our muscle of constantly keeping an eye on new policies that the government is putting out, draft policies, understanding how these impact the work that we're doing and our communities, and see if we are able to build up enough of a mass of people who are aware of the policies, who are able to understand and speak in policy language to be able to make changes to it. I want to talk about three examples now. Three examples of free and open source software, all of which came out of India, and how maybe all of you belong to a certain digital commons ecosystem, which might be able to again like take lessons in terms of how these how you could sustain yourself through these projects. One of them is Kitty. I don't know how many people use a terminal regularly. Few people. Kitty is a terminal emulator. It's a terminal that got created by this person called COVID out of like from India. And if I'm not wrong, he works full time on Kitty and another open source project that he created. A terminal is something that developers live in practically the entire day, their entire professional lives. And a terminal is a massive boost for productivity for a developer, right? Like a great terminal, not only does it get out of the way, but it also does things which massively improve my productivity as a developer. It ensures that I'm getting the right information. It ensures that I'm able to get access to things as easily as possible. It ensures that I'm able to run the commands or get feedback from the commands, see the results in a very meaningful way, and I'm able to get things done very well. So a great terminal is an incredible value add, right? We also programmers also live in code editors every day. Therefore, there are companies who are more than happy to pay for a very good code editor. Because a good code editor, again, increases your productivity. You're able to get code out, you're able to get code written, you're able to debug code, etc., much faster than in a bad or a mediocre code editor. But the funny thing is, companies are happy to pay for a code editor. Most are not happy to pay for a terminal. Even though people spend as much time on a terminal, if not more time hitting their head in a terminal than they do in an editor. Most of the users are going to be individuals. There are very few businesses which rely on terminals directly. It's mostly individual developers who directly care about the terminal, who use it on a day-to-day basis, and therefore are reliant on how good or bad it is. The community is also mostly technical in nature, right? Like, because you as a common user aren't going to open a terminal and then run commands. By default, if you're using a terminal, you're also a technical person and you are doing something with the innards of the system. You're running some commands, you're running some scripts, etc., etc. So you're in some ways comfortable with the software. You're comfortable with the domain that these things are built in. But like I said, there is no institutional support for Kitty the terminal. Very few people, even though they're technical users, don't contribute to the project directly. Right? I'm a software developer. I can understand the software that Kitty is written in, but I am not going to go out of my way to actually go make changes to it, modify it, etc., because I don't have enough time. And the terminal is not too complicated, but it is a reasonably large project that it is very difficult for me to immediately start making contributions to. It will take me at least a couple of weeks, if not months, to be able to understand the software enough and then actually make changes to it. So Kitty sadly fully relies on individual donations to be able to make things work. So how many projects are you all working on, or are you in a part of the digital commons where it is primarily domain experts who use the work that you are using, There is no business that is going to be fully reliant on the work that you're doing. And you might have to end up relying on donations again from your technical users, from your domain users, because it doesn't have a direct impact on some business. No business is directly going to acknowledge the work that you're doing in your part of the digital commons, right? And again, the one of the ways in which he's at least been able to in some to some level succeed in raising donations is because it is very clear front and center that hey, look, this is work that an individual is doing. There's someone behind this screen. That person is spending time constantly, actively, proactively improving and maintaining this software, this part of the digital commons. And therefore, if you are getting some benefit out of it, whether that's financial benefit or otherwise, do consider supporting the work, right? And there's a certain amount of some people might feel that it is shameful to be able to talk about the fact that hey, look, you need to support my work. Here is how you can support my work. But you also need to put it out there that hey, look, this work is happening in a thankless manner, and if you want to support me and continue to support me to continue doing this work, please consider supporting me financially, right? So in the software development case, it's relatively easier because everyone is on GitHub, everyone lives on GitHub. There's a certain amount of notoriety that people gain if they're very active on GitHub and if their projects are very popular on GitHub. And therefore, if you look at COVID's COVID, KOVID is the person who created Kitty. If you look at COVID's popularity on GitHub, you'll see that there's a bunch of people who are supporting him as sponsors, right? But again, it's nowhere close to the kind of value that the terminal emulator generates for the software development ecosystem. Especially because the project has also moved the ecosystem as a whole. Like he's done a bunch of technical improvements which didn't exist in any other emulators, and now other emulators are following suit. Right? Other emulators are following Kitty in adding new features. But Kitty fundamentally relies on like donations from individuals and on the goodwill of individuals to say that, okay, no, I get benefit out of it. I know that people get benefit out of it. So I am going to put money where my mouth is and support this work. The next thing is like the ERP systems I talked about, right? So Kitty is very individual focused, individuals use it, individuals gain value from it, and it's mostly hidden away from businesses and also end users. Like most end users are never going to interact with the terminal. ERP systems are also similar in some way. Like none of us are like ever going to run into a system where we're directly interacting with an ERP system, like unless we're sort of C-suite executives or business people. Very few of us directly have to engage with these things, but they are sitting one level behind all the things that we're doing, right? There is financial work that is happening in organizations, HR work, customer relationships management, etc., etc., etc. All of these things are happening in some ERP systems, which are sitting one level or two levels behind the software that we are interacting with. And ERP systems are also very business criticals, right? If the ERP system isn't implemented well, or if there are some sort of weird issues with it, businesses are going to either grind to a halt or just completely be stuck. And therefore, businesses are also very careful about picking something. And if they pick something, they stay with it forever. These are also relatively slow moving pieces of software. It's not something that is going to change overnight and therefore add a whole bunch of new features, etc., etc. But again, this isn't going to touch you as an end user. This isn't going to touch you as a developer. But it is something that the business people are going to care very much about. And the interesting thing also is it's complicated enough that me as a business, I can't usually just pick the software and then use it by myself. I usually have someone who is going to make changes to it and customize it to my business's needs. So there are implementation partners for most ERP systems which say that, okay, fine, you know what, I'll take the software, I'll modify it to fit into this specific business's use case, and I'm going to ensure that it is fit for purpose in this specific case. So the model here is that, look, there's a direct financial benefit to the partners who are going to make money implementing this ERP for you. You, as the ERP creator, is going to get some amount of, is going to capture some amount of the revenue that your partners are bringing in. And therefore, it's in your best interest to build out this partner ecosystem. Right? So again, are you in a part of the digital commons where a direct end user is not going to interact with the work that you're doing, but rather maybe you are working with a bunch of civil society organizations who are going to take your work directly on top of what you're building, and then sort of like simplify it or make sense of it or put other layers of abstraction between what you've created and an end user. Because there again, the model that has worked for Frappe and ERP Next, both of which are based out of Frappe is based out of Bombay, is building out that partner ecosystem and doing everything to support that partner ecosystem. So that they're able to say, you know what, the partners bring in the money, the partners are doing the work of customizing the ERP to whoever is the end user, and they don't have to worry about it. And they are going to capture some amount of the revenue that the partner is bringing in, because let's say the partner is using their cloud for hosting the ERP, their like online services, their training services, their certification, etc., etc., etc. But again, is your project one where you're creating something, let's say an open data corpus? Is that open data corpus directly going to be relevant to an end user, or is it going to be relevant to other civil society organizations which have a direct stake in ensuring that the data corpus lives on, the data corpus continues to flourish and keeps like getting more and more revisions and more meaningful updates, and therefore you needing to work with that partner to be able to figure out what is the right sustainability model here. Because in this case, a bunch of partners, the implementation partners, because again, it's in their best interest to ensure that the ERP software, the free and open source software, is as robust and good as possible. They contribute back to the software. They fix bugs in the software. They add features into the software, etc., etc., etc. So there is some sort of a meaningful collaboration between these two parties, and some amount of money flowing in from the partners into the people who are creating the software to ensure that these things are sustainable. Disclaimer, Frappe is one of our like financial supporters. But yeah, the way that these things naturally evolve is because that software is now essential not just to the person who created it, but to this partner ecosystem. You end up with some sort of a third party foundation, a vendor neutral foundation, which is managing that project, right? Which is managing the project and ensuring that no like vendor specific things are going into the underlying software commons, and everyone who's part of that ecosystem, all the various partners who want to have a stake in it, are able to have a say in the direction of the project itself, right? Because all of them are able to say that, hey, no, look, we are unnecessarily adding things which don't make sense. This isn't broadly applicable to a lot of the businesses. You're taking it in a certain, you're taking the software or the software commons in a direction which doesn't make sense for everyone. How is the commons being governed in this particular case, etc., etc. And that's a natural direction that like these things flow into. And again, they've been pretty successful in having a very large ecosystem. One other example that I want to give here is Balmni by ThoughtWorks. I don't know how many people, I don't know if anyone here has heard about Balmni. Balmni is a hospital management software that got created by this company called ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks is a very large software service provider, and they created it because it was part of their social giving back to the social sector program. They built out this software hospital management system for a very rural hospital in rural Maharashtra, if I remember correctly. Interestingly enough, that project grew to a point where that can now be used to manage any sort of hospital. One country, maybe Nepal or Bangladesh, adopted the software to be able to manage all of their public health infrastructure, the hospitals that they have. There's absolutely beautiful instances of someone running it on their laptop on a board which is constantly navigating a Southeast Asian country and helping provide rural healthcare in those regions. So there again, Balmni is also very similar to the Frappe case because they have implementation partners who are actually adapting the hospital management software to the hospitals. And they end up being able to receive some amount of support from the partners, and the partners are helping them sort of steer the direction of the project in a meaningful way. But again, there's also challenges in terms of how do you capture some amount of the revenue so that Balmni, the project creator itself, also has revenue and money to be able to sustain itself. The final thing is Pratham Books and Storyweaver. I don't know how many people here have heard about Pratham Books. Perfect. Okay, this is a very common example. How many people here know? I mean, okay, all of you know that the content is Creative Commons. How many people here know that the software is also free and open source? Okay, a couple of people. So the online Storyweaver platform is free and open source. They created it, I don't know how many years ago, and the software is also robust enough that again, some other country took it, white labeled it, put their name and picture on it, and said that this is now our platform. It's free and open source. They could have they can do it. They can do whatever they want with them. They modified it and made those changes. You already know most of this. Creative Commons. The stack is free and open source. The stack also has tools to be able to do the translation. I don't know if that's also one of the ways in which people are involved here, doing translations of the books that are available on Storyweaver. Perfect. And then again, I'm guessing the license is also share alike. So you make a translation and then you can publish it back on the Storyweaver platforms where other people can also read it. Right? We have been having very interesting conversations with the Storyweaver folks because of the free and open source software aspect of the platform that they've built. So it's end users who are directly engaging in the platform, right? It's not technical people like Kitty. It's not business people like ERP Next. It's end users. It's like me, it's my son. We are the ones who directly engage with the Storyweaver platform, and we go there to read the books in whatever language of our choice it is. But then how do you ensure that the software, the website itself, is continued to be kept up to date? But actually, it's not just like end users like me. While the majority of people who access it might be end users like me, there's also nation states which rely on it. There's large government departments which rely on it, education departments which rely on it, college, not colleges, maybe schools and other education institutions which directly rely on it. Right? So, in some sense, theoretically, there is then an impetus on those organizations to ensure that they are supporting the Storyweaver platform. While Pratham Books might have a funding model in place to be able to say that, hey, look, here is how we are going to create new content, put new books out there, and ensure that we're able to build an ecosystem of translation work happening on the platform. There is also a similar responsibility on the educational institutions or the government to ensure that the platform itself is funded. Okay? Because if the platform itself isn't accessible, then how is that information actually ending up in the hands of meaningful people? Right? How are you going to ensure that the platform is up and running and that the platform is sustainable in a way where you're able to add new features, you're able to continue working on it, you're able to continue making meaningful improvements to it and changes to it so that it's much more accessible and continues to remain accessible to people. So there, in my theoretical understanding, these are the people that I believe should be made responsible, right? The education institutions and the government should start taking in money to ensure that people are paying their fair share. But I don't think this is what is happening. And like I said, individuals make up a large fraction of the user base, but education institutions and nation states are part of the user base. And they, given both their outsized funding and the outsized impact that they receive from a platform like this, they should start kicking in money. And in our conversations, okay, the sentence got broken. But yeah, in our conversations with them, they're now trying to understand how can we tap into the free and open source software community so that the Storyweaver platform itself receives some amount of support from the free and open source software community. They get some technical people coming in from the community who are able to add new features, add new functionality, just do basic maintenance and improvement, and maybe add a couple of interesting features. But there again, there's a certain element of tapping into young, technically competent people, but also making it very clear to them the kind of social impact that this work has. In my personal experience, there's a lot of people who are getting out of college right now who are beginning to acknowledge the social capital that they're able to build by working with civil society organizations, and not just the capital that they are going to accumulate in their bank by working for a large MNC. But the important aspect is how do you ensure that you're making it clear the kind of impact that people's work is going to have. As someone who's done software development before, but who was lucky enough to work right on the other side of the table as a client, a lot of people in the software ecosystem in this country suffer from multiple layers of middle management, both on the company side where they're working and also on the client side. So very few people actually get to experience the impact that their work is having on the ground with whoever is using it. And this, making it clear the fact that your work is going to clearly have an impact on the other side and also making them personally experience that impact is having a significant amount of push and getting more people to start hopefully contributing to some of these projects. There's a couple of more examples here, more open source projects from India. One of them is called the Core Stack. I don't know how many people here work on resiliency and conservation. Care by Open Healthcare Network is another free and open source software in the healthcare management space. Bamni, I already mentioned it. Digit is a project by the e-governance foundation. Digit is used by cities and departments to be able to do e-governance functionality in their own systems. But the question is, where do all of these projects lie on this spectrum, right? Is the digital commons work that you're doing, is it meant for a technical audience? Is it meant for partners in the civil society space? Is it meant for end users? But where a nation state or a department is going to have a significant amount of role. The contributors who you will get, right? Are you getting contributions? Are you sustaining that work in the digital commons from the creator of the project? Can you get technical or non-technical contributions from the partners, the civil society organizations? Can you get contributions from the community, from the broader community? I think this is where Story Viewer has excelled, right, in terms of book contributions and translation contributions from the user community. But then they haven't been able to do the same thing for the technical platform that has been built out, right? So who is the potential person who's going to contribute to it? And then finally, the thing that you're working on, especially with free and open source software, is very clear. There's sort of different layers of the stack. The Linux operating system is bottom of the stack. Everyone relies on it, very few people acknowledge it. And then there are sort of applications which live right at the top, things that we directly engage with, GIM, VLC media player, etc., etc. And therefore, they're top of the stack, so everyone is directly aware of the software itself and the kind of impact that it has. And where is it? The digital commons work that you're doing, is it buried under multiple layers and people directly are rarely going to engage with it, the majority of the audience? Or are you building digital commons work that is directly going to touch practically every individual who's going to come into contact with it and are therefore actively going to be aware of that work? I think one example in the wiki ecosystem is the Wikipedia project itself is top of the stack. Everyone engages with the Wikipedia pages, but then the Wikipedia software is bottom of the stack, a little bit further down, right? Because very few people who engage with Wikipedia realize the fact that Media Wiki is a part of the software commons and that it is free and open source. And then you go deeper and look at the languages and the Linux operating systems, etc., etc. These things are important because it also helps you understand where am I in this stack, and therefore, because of my presence, who should I actually try and target? And one of the other last things is a lot of this work is sustained by the community itself, but in some cases, there might be a potential for some civil society, some non-profit funder to come and say that, hey, look, I want to fund this work because the work that you're doing fits across all the grantees that I have. Right? This has an impact on all the grantees that I have, and it has an impact on maybe better work for them, reducing overhead for them, etc., etc., etc. So, is the work that you're doing in the digital commons, is it funder focused? Can you try and pitch it to a funder to ensure that the funder is adopting it, and therefore the funder might actually help sustain it financially, and is also ensuring that the grantee organizations across the board for that funder are adopting it and using it meaningfully? Or are you just going to be grantee focused or like individual org focused or user focused, where it's never sort of going to bubble up and be generalizable across the board for an entire institution to fund? That is me. That took much longer than I had planned. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions. I think I have 5 minutes theoretically to take questions, but I'll hang around in case there is any conversation after that.
So it is a FOSS presentation. I will try to share my story. My company, we transformed a newspaper. We transformed a newspaper in Kerala called Janagam from a completely Microsoft Windows ecosystem to a completely free software operating system. The problem with the newspaper is every day in 11 p.m. the PDF must goes to the press. Otherwise, the next day paper will be off. There is no printing. So in a mission critical scenario, we done the migration and we used all the power of the open source software to migrate to nearly 100 employees across Kerala to a free software ecosystem. And it is running very smooth, more than 5 years.
Perfect. Thank you. I will add this one other small thing about, not small thing, a big thing about Kerala. It's fairly common for like most school students to say that, okay, I'm just going to pick up Windows, like eventually when they go to college. Funnily enough, in Kerala, not funnily enough, Kerala decided that no, we're just going to have Linux in all the schools, all the public schools. And therefore, kids who are graduating from these schools, eventually when they go to college, they're perfectly comfortable with Ubuntu. I think the Andhra government also gave free laptops to college kids recently, and they gave laptops with Ubuntu on it, not Windows, because it was cheaper. And funnily enough, those kids stuck around to Ubuntu, decided not to pick up Windows, and eventually when they graduated, they were perfectly comfortable continuing to use Ubuntu. This again is a fundamental story about defaults and what defaults are we ingrained with, and are we questioning the defaults or not?
Just a quick, but like, this is really one of the very important session, and especially we need to. Yeah, this is one of the very important discussion which happened, and I don't know what is. I just wanted to know about your outreach program, because I know there are FOSS communities, especially active in Kerala and the southern part, but I'm a mentor of a Wikipedia club, college club, and I love to have such sessions. I'm just curious, is there any regular sessions of orientation or something is happening?
Yeah. I think we can definitely take this conversation afterward. But yeah, like I said, FOSS United is only one of the free and open source software communities in the country. We are thankfully financially supported to have full-time staff to be able to do this work around the year. And yeah, we have active communities which meet in a number of different states and cities. And we also travel regularly to colleges to be able to do to help them with orientation, use Linux, and so on and so forth.
Sorry for the quick plug-in. Ankit is also somebody that you should talk to exactly for this conversation.
So it's a common question or whatever. So I don't think to solve this problem in other FOSS communities. So it's a good thing and bad thing with MediaWiki ecosystem, the MediaWiki software ecosystem is the core is hard to contribute to. And then when new developers come, we say, okay, like you can create a JavaScript module, create a user script, and now it's used by editors. But because of that, what has happened is there's a lot of code fragmentation, not code fragmentation, like feature fragmentation. Basically, for it's the same editing workflow, we have like 5 different tools solving more or less the same problem. And it's virtually at a point where we can't merge now. So it's like a lot of duplicate work as well. So.
Yeah, no, I don't know if this is on. Am I audible? Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, this is a fairly common problem that like we experience. There's some amount of balance between there needs to be some sort of like beginner friendly tasks for people so that they're able to learn programming and they're able to pick things up. But at the same time, some amount of big picture orientation work that also needs to happen at the project level. It requires certain amount of mentorship, a certain like professionalism from the contributors also to like understand how to build modular work that can also be merged back upstream, etc., etc. Not an easy problem, but also like a relatively solved problem. I definitely don't know at the MediaWiki sort of scope in terms of like how big MediaWiki is, but there have definitely been other large projects which have been able to sort of tackle this in some way or another. I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about is how do you like nurture new contributors in such a way that you're able to slowly bring them up, but also ensure that they have small wings all along the way so that they also like continue hanging around in the community, right? And yeah, I think there's a few different ways in which I've seen it work out. We can like talk about that later, but yeah, it can definitely be possible. Sir, am I audible? Yes.
Yes.
No, when we have a, like, I think by December, you might know the news, Windows 10 is expiring. But when it comes to XP expiring, like, I mean, when Linux is going to close, I can find a lot of FOSS communities, Linux communities, pushing public to change towards Linux kind of thing. I find a lot of Facebook posts, social media posts, asking people to move to Linux. But surprisingly, when this happening, this transaction is happening for Windows 10 kind of thing. And most of the communities, they're not interested to convert the end users to the Windows users to Linux. Is it because of lack of interest or they tried it and they vexed out this thing? I want to know your opinion.
No, this is fragmentation. There is an active campaign right now called End of 10. We are part of that campaign and we are using the fact that Windows 10 is end of life to actually get people to ditch Windows and move on to Linux. I think the problem though is the fact that there is just so many communities dispersed all around the country who are trying to focus on their smaller area, and there isn't like one large push which sort of is like a large enough campaign which everyone in the country has heard about. This is in some way the nature of the free and open source software communities, like fragmented, but also grassroots everywhere in the country. We do need to do some amount of, not some amount, a lot of campaigning so that everyone gets to know about it. It's just called End of 10. So if you just search End of 10,
I mean, just take user, which one you suggest? Which flavor of Linux you suggest? For Windows user.
I pick Ubuntu. I'm happy with Ubuntu. You can use Ubuntu with KDE. I think KDE is very similar to, like, I think it's more customizable to maybe look like Windows. But yeah, I'm happy with.
I don't do technology, so I'll ask a slightly different question. In some ways, or in more than one way, we are brothers from the same mother, right? Or another one. Wikimedia system has a huge problem of gender and bias. Right? We've been putting in huge amount of resources in trying to address it. And there's also a lot of systemic bias within all of our projects. FOSS does almost similar things. So what happens there? Do you also have a gender gap?
Yeah.
Do you also have a lot of bias?
Yeah.
Do you also have active cases of harassment, active cases of difficulty?
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you do? Are you doing something that we should be doing, or have you been able to pick up something like our universal code of conduct? And just wanted to.
Yeah, no. So yes, there is a significant amount of bias in terms of lack of representation for a dearth of representation from like women and like especially underrepresented groups. Not only that, the FOSS ecosystem is sort of worse because there's a lot of perception about FOSS being by computer scientists for computer scientists.
Yeah.
And like I start most of my things by saying I'm someone who has a physics background and I did like scientific software to ensure that there's some amount of no, this is not the case. Like FOSS isn't by computer scientists for computer scientists. Some amount of it is definitely systematic cultural perception about computer science in a certain way. And then on top of it, the fact that there is a lack of people to look up to. In terms of like who do you look up to as a woman or someone who's underrepresented in tech, if you want to try and inspire yourself to be able to get into this ecosystem. One thing specifically that we're doing there is a project called Folklore. Yeah, perfect. So it's a very simple listicle site where all we're doing is we're just listing people and the work that they're doing and putting some sort of a human touch to again like them and the work that they're doing. Just to be able to say that there are people from the Indian ecosystem in India who are actively working on some of these things and see if you're able to relate to any of these people in the list over here. This isn't like anything dramatically new either. And again, there's I think 40, 50-ish people, projects that they contribute to, not contribute to. These are people who either created these projects or they're maintaining these projects and they're officially recognized as a maintainer or a core contributor. Because there's a lot of people who do like minor contributions here and there, but there is either a lack of awareness or people just think that there is zero open source projects that are coming out of India or maintenance that is coming out of India, like core maintenance. And this is like our answer to that. And there's also very interesting like second order things that are happening on top of it. First order, it was very clearly, we just want to do this so that we are making people aware. And it's a very simple campaign to be able to make people aware of what we are doing. The higher second order effects, interestingly, are it's just a simple website. It points to people's GitHub or points to their personal websites. And student communities from around the country are accessing this information, looking at the people, and directly reaching out to those people to say, hey, look, we came across you when we saw you on folklore. Your profile looks interesting. Your work looks interesting. We'd like you to come and do like a talk for us. Right. And I think those sorts of like second order, higher order effects are like usually not something that we can imagine. But like even something as simple as this, which we just created, we very simply created to be able to say, look, this perception that there is no open source coming out of India should die. And until that perception disappears, and culturally, as an ecosystem, we say, yeah, we don't know personally what the projects are, but we are really sure that there are people who are creating open source projects from India. We know that there are people who are maintaining open source work from India. When that cultural shift happens and people are like, oh, wait, yeah, when we know someone else is doing it, maybe we can also do it. We're hoping that that sort of inspiration can happen. Here, we are actively trying to ensure that at least, like, we're not there yet with folklore, but we're trying to ensure good, if not equal representation on folklore. Because at the end of the day, like yes, it does matter what the larger ecosystem is and what the distribution in the larger ecosystem is, but just as important is also who we are putting on a platform for everyone to see.
Would also want Rahul to be available for tea for all of us. So maybe we should keep some questions for tea. Yeah, so
If there's coffee available, I'm happy to hang around.
I'm not sure good coffee.
It's coffee.
So I'm a non-tech person. I describe myself as a non-tech person and a content Wikimedian. Primarily use technology. I am sure like a lot of people here are like also started as a content Wikimedians, but also contributing to Wikimedia movement. But I have an intent to collaborate with FOSS communities. What can be first shake hand in this direction?
Now,
Oh, I thought you are going
really
to-
shake his hand.
No, we already did it in the after. So again, like this is something that like me and Pawan Garu were talking about in an earlier conversation. We need to acknowledge the fact that like you're all brothers and sisters, and it's great to hear like all of you saying that, hey, look, like you're all brothers and sisters, just from like different parts of the same like larger ecosystem, right? There's definitely a significant amount of fragmentation in terms of some people just don't even acknowledge the fact that, hey, we should actually, the same way that the FOSS community hears from expert users of some open source software, we should also be able to talk to you as expert users of Wikimedia software, MediaWiki software, right? We also talk about the dynamics of the free and open source software ecosystem in terms of how are we bringing new people in, how are we sustaining those people, how are we sort of like enriching those people and helping them get better. And then also, how are we getting them into positions of responsibility or authority where they're able to steer the larger direction of the ecosystem as a whole. So we definitely, on our end, we as free and open source software communities across the country need to do a better job of trying to reach out to people from across all of these different people, including, for example, the OSM like India community, to say that, hey, look, like why don't you come along? Like there's open source in all of these different places. For communities which are sort of apprehensive, like I would probably say, you all are still expert users of the software, and that is the thing that you can comment on, right? For a lot of software communities, just saying that, look, we are happy to come and talk about us as expert users of this free and open source software, how it has evolved, the software has evolved to be able to best suit your needs, and how you've been able to make the software evolve, right? That feels like a great way where all of you can participate in free and open source software ecosystems already. And then, like, we can only take it further from there. But that feels like the very first place where we can collaborate together. And the good thing and the bad thing is the fact that like things are just so split all across the country that there are like smaller communities everywhere in the country. So please do try and find a local free software community or an open source software community where you're currently staying right now, and then see if they're doing an event where you can go and speak. In Hyderabad, we definitely have it. FOSS United has Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, Bombay. In all of these cities, we actively organize events, and we know that there are active events happening also in Lucknow, Kochi, Trivandrum, Belgaum in Karnataka, whole bunch of other like places all around the country. Regular free and open source software communities which come together to be able to talk about again anything and everything open source. So yeah, that might be the first way in which all of you could participate in a free and open source software community around you.
Do we have a FOSS community multiple places for questions?
There is one in Bhopal and Indore, if I remember correctly. There's also one in Jagdalpur in Chhattisgarh, but that's not Madhya Pradesh. But yeah, I think there is an active-ish community in Bhopal and Indore. So I think it's just worth checking free software Bhopal, free software Indore, open source software Bhopal, something of that sort. Some permutation and combination of it should be able to find the right community. Yes. I don't know how much longer you are all comfortable. I am comfortable.
Yes, so I'm going to take Manoj's question and I'm also going to something here. But question.
Basically, I again disclaimer come from a non-tech community. I primarily in my job responsibility work on governance, and that's why my question is majorly about governance. We have all sorts of challenges that we can imagine in terms of how globally we are placed and how it is being dominated by one region, and then others are struggling to have a say in the governance processes. So I was recently reading about the governance model that was released and was being discussed in the recent event, right? Do you want to understand, are you having any kind of active conversations about how you can adopt some sort of model where there is more inclusion, more conscious inclusion, especially for Indian FOSS communities? That is one thing that I wanted to discuss. The other thing that I wanted to discuss was more about AI. The one thing that Wikipedia is struggling with, how our information is being used to build those systems and not without acknowledging the source. I'm assuming it is the same for open source softwares as well. So are you also thinking about how to reform your governance practices to include some policies that can actually check that usage? Thank you.
Right. I'm going to put my organizer hat here and take a couple of more questions, and I'm going to ask you, Rahul, to think about it and then take all of those answers on bad coffee. Would that work?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Also, because there are certain people who would leave about in 10-15 minutes and there is a reflection session. I don't want it to look like we attended Rahul's conversation and don't care for feedback, right? So Manoj's question, I think you have got it. I think Dr. Badwa had something, and then okay, questions, and then it's on you.
Yeah.
Wow. Your question.
Is there any online meetups also happen in
Yes.
the course? So where can we have link of these?
Yeah, so fossunited.org is our home online for any events. The FOSS policy conversations are all happening virtually. So we're just doing a virtual meetup once a month where, sorry, I'll answer the question later. Sorry.
Question?
So there is always threat given. For example, I work with many libraries. So libraries,
They are told that the FOA is free and open source, so it can get crashed any point of time. It will stop after 4-5 years. So that's why you have to adopt the customized.
Because open source, people can log in hacking system, but that's a closed source is better. That's what how you could sell them something.
There have been 3 questions.
Okay, I alone have 3 curiosities, and maybe if they resonate with anyone else who is coming from a non-tech point of view. I was wondering, or I was reflecting on the freedom and free of cost kind of terminology over here. So is there a FOSS that is FOSS, which is open source software, but costs money? So I'm thinking about the other way around. The second one is there, any kind of checks and balances against exploitation? So if everything is being done from the point of view of, we borrow from open source, like OpenAI and all of generative AI, and then we as a community say that this is not done. So let fines or whatever be the cost of doing business in this context. And the other thing was what kind of model, for instance, Storyweaver or Pratham books be? Because I understand everything you explained about them, but in cases where they ask you to register, log in, so in a way, does that reflecting on the idea of freedom or free, is that free? What are we, giving in? And finally, just an input on, AP government and devices in schools. I in fact heard a very different story, which
Okay.
said the laptops and tablets or whatever came with Byju's and everything fitted onto it.
Ah,
They got a freemium, and after that, parents could not do anything because they wanted them to buy this thing. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
So, enough food for thought. Okay, so there are two ways of doing this. One is we step out for coffee, and then the coffee conversations become very interesting, and it will be difficult for me to bring you back here. And I'll be the wrong person or the difficult one. So I'm going to flip it. There is a very small feedback / closing reflection session. I'm going to put Dr. Badma on spot. She's been with us for the last 2 days. She also comes from a point of view of criticality, where she's looking at things that work or why did they work or why did they not work. And we also have, I think, Pawan, who's going to reflect on behalf of OKI as to why did we do this. And after that, we'll all move towards coffee, and then we'll gravitate towards conversations that interest us, and we'll have it as long as we, right? At the end of the day, it's the free word, right?
Very nicely, I think I will become the evil one because the feedback session was not supposed to be as short as he made it out to be.
So very quickly, sorry, I just wanted to say, can we just have a quick round of applause for Rahul? We're just going to close this Zoom call. Thank you so much to all the online participants who joined us. We'll turn off the call now and get into our feedback session. Yeah.
How does